Am I the story that I tell myself that I am? Am I this personality? Am I this body? Am I my thoughts? The dark night of the soul is caused by the ego. God is inviting you to awaken your divinity. I went through years of depression, utter hopelessness, utter meaninglessness when I met my first enlightened teacher. I went into samadhi or satori. You have to let go all that you have grasped. You are a limitless being. Welcome, dear one. This is an amazing conversation I had on the Phase 4 podcast with JP. I love this interview so much. First, because of the energy of it, we had this beautiful back and forth. I think you're going to get a lot out of this because we went into so many deep subjects: spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, self sabotage. I think this is going to be a treat for you all. If you want to check out JP and his podcast, I will put a link in the description below. Show him some love as well. If this resonates with you, I invite you to check out my Spiritual Awakening Masterclass and multiple other masterclasses that I have put into an app just for you. Go to my website, awakenwithra.com, to download it for free. Now, here's this beautiful conversation.
My guest today is Brad Netjer. He is an ordained Buddhist monk who quit his six-figure job to mentor awakening souls towards enlightenment. And today we're going to talk about all of that and more. And Ra, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, JP. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I love your story. I always kind of just begin with tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, that's a great question. My entire life has been path of self discovery, and I have redefined this thing called myself, our identity that we create for ourselves, right? And because I'm a spiritual awakening mentor now, it's a question that has a lot of depth. Because am I the story that I tell myself that I am or others? Am I this personality? Am I this body? Am I my thoughts? But for the sake of this conversation, it's important to also see that these are the roles we play in this world. And if in at the DMV they ask you for your name, you got to tell your name, right?
Right.
Even though we are the
Okay.
universe, we have to say, this is who I am. So my name is Ra Netjer. I'm an ordained Buddhist monk, and I have been fortunate to have a life that has been very eventful. All the beautiful ups and downs that taught me amazing insights into myself, my life, the truth of who we truly are beyond ideas, names, and forms. And my spiritual awakening began really young. Actually, even before I was born, the story starts. My mother went through a difficult time before my birth. She had lost a baby before me. I was the first child, and she was afraid she would lose this baby too. And her doctor had cautioned her to be really, really careful, and she was completely scared. So she went to every temple she could, every god she could. She made a deal and said, please, God, I don't want to lose this baby like the first one. I will do anything. I won't hold on to this baby like this is my baby. I will give it to God. I want a baby that brings the light of spirituality to the world. And that's how I was invited into her womb. And because of that, when I was 5 years old, I had my first experience of remembering who I truly am. Past lives, seeing that I had come to this earth many, many times. And I also remembered the times when I came to earth for spirituality and got stuck in the little things, the minutiae of life, and forgot actually why I'm here and lost another lifetime which could have been used to find myself. That is why we actually come here. And that is when I begged to Divine Mother, my word for God at that time, and cried for my higher purpose to be granted to me at that time. And as it happens, in my teenagers, even though after that I had many beautiful experiences, I was a clairvoyant since my childhood. I was able to heal people. My father was a healer who healed about 1 million people in India. And even with all that preparation, lifetimes of being on the path, I forgot everything in my teenagers and I was a total rebel. I was playing Counter Strike like crazy. I had a team. I was the captain and we were about to go off and play a championship. I was about to be a pro gamer. But that is when life gave me a wake up call. I failed 3 exams, which were the main exams: physics, chemistry, and math. And this was 12th grade. And I was in my late teenagers. And even though I was a first rank student before that, because I paid absolutely no interest to anything else but gaming. And this was my rebellion because throughout my life, I was a good student, good person, good son. So in the teenagers, you have that urge to go against all of that, right? So I was sent to study with my uncle. My parents said, if you're by yourself, you're going to get back into this gaming thing. So let us send you away to your native town. And I went back to study with my uncle, who was a gold medalist in exactly the subjects that I had failed in. But actually, what ended up happening was as he was teaching me these 3 subjects, he was also studying deeply this book called Viveka Chudamani. This book is a great work of non duality, Advaita Vedanta, written by Adi Shankaracharya. And he goes into the depth of some really core concepts of who we truly are, like uh, karma, Maya, all these concepts which are so well explained in this book. My uncle, he would be reading 1 or 2 sentences from this book in the middle of teaching me and giving me some homework. He would be just sitting there lost in this contemplation for hours at a time. And I was so curious. What the heck are you reading? I want to know. So this is when he explained to me, what is Maya? He said, imagine all this, the entire world is as it is, all this is going on, all the things, this chaos, all this beauty is still here. But imagine just this part in between your ears is missing, right? What if your brain didn't exist? Would all this exist? And I couldn't answer that question. He asked me, try to imagine a color that you've never seen before. I tried really hard. I couldn't. And all these things, he showed me what was Maya, this grand illusion of life. Then he explained what was karma. And he was a very good teacher. So this reignited my flame of spirituality, that thirst, that hunger for truth. And I started reading voraciously. The book I picked up, thankfully, was an amazing book called Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahamsa Yogananda. It's been a classic, a bestseller for so long. And that book has changed the lives of so many people. And that book gave me clarity again that my life is about spirituality and nothing else. And I wanted to, at that point, leave everything, leave my family, leave all that I knew, and run away to become a renunciate monk. in a monastery.
Wow,
Yeah. But
that's
thankfully,
fascinating.
yeah, thankfully, somehow I was guided by a channel to go into a different path. And that's why I'm still here. So it's quite a long story, but life has been gracious to give me all these beautiful experiences.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you're here and I'm grateful that you did all that because you wouldn't be here otherwise. I find it a little funny that your maths were like in your culture, it's probably like you're not allowed to be bad at math. And so is that some kind of like self-sabotage against like the system, the whatever? But I think
Yeah.
Yogananda, that book, Autobiography of a Yogi, Steve Jobs gave a copy of everybody at his funeral, gave a copy of
Yes.
that book. That's how much meaning it had for him.
Yeah. It
And
was
yeah,
the only
the
book he had on his iPad when he died. And he would read that book every year. He would read it repeatedly.
yeah, there's some fascinating stories, the tigers and just
Mm.
crazy.
Yeah.
Very cool. And they asked the question in that book, and you started off with it almost as, who am I? And that's
Mhm.
constantly the question we're asking, right?
Yeah.
Names and forms. We know that this isn't the way. I'm currently reading this book. It's called The Middle Way, Faith Grounded in
Ah.
Reason. It's actually a difficult read. I read a lot of books with the Dalai Lama. This one's difficult for me
Mm.
because it talks about that past life, consciousness before conception,
Mm.
consciousness coming into conception. Then it doesn't, I haven't got there yet. I'm sure we'll talk about, but it talks about names and forms, the 12 links, and Maya, the illusion of everything that we're
Wow.
attaching to all these things, right? We attach to our name, our clothing, our house, our family, our car, our dog. And then really, like, you come into this world with nothing and you leave with nothing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's the right way. But I
Wow,
would
I'm
love
so
to know.
happy to be talking to you about this because you reading this book and looking at your podcast, the people you have interviewed, the topics you have explored, I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So I'm going to stop talking and let you keep going. But what was it like a spiritual awakening? I think I heard you talk about a spiritual awakening. I have my own book and it's 4 series all in one book. And the first series is called 12 Steps to a Spiritual Awakening. So
Wow.
what I would love to know your experience of the spiritual awakening. Like, did you're like, what is going on here? Or how did that feel and how did that look like?
Well, story of my life. What is going on here? Before, I mean, through this time of spiritual awakening. And that's how it is. Having worked with thousands of people, it's that question like, what is happening? Who am I? What is going on? Why am I here? It's full of questions because we start off in this world picking up answers that are ready made and given to us, right? From our parents, from our society, from the media, from everybody around us. We are like a sponge which absorbs all these concepts and belief systems, which we make our own. But when our spirit calls us to awaken, it's about questioning everything that we have held on to be true, to the depth of even this fact of existence, the fact of, am I this body? Am I this mind, this identity? It's just a crisis in a way. It's an existential crisis. And it can be really hard. People think spiritual awakening is rainbows and butterflies and unicorns and, you know, peaches and ice cream and all these nice things, right? But more realistically, it's about going through your dark night of the soul because it's the death of the ego, where the ego, which is this fictional story that we have made up about, about ourselves, which is important to have to interact this in this world, right? It's important to be able to relate to others because we communicate with stories. We communicate through concepts. Words, each word is a concept, right? But at the same time, when you believe that to be the truth, there's a difference between truth and facts, right? But most people take it to be true. They believe their thoughts, they believe their belief systems so completely that when the wake up call comes from spirit, their world is shaken up.
Right.
As mine was, I went through years of depression, utter hopelessness, utter meaninglessness. I couldn't get out of my bed, not even the bedroom, couldn't get out of bed for 4 days once, couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't muster up that motivation to do anything to continue my survival
Yeah.
because it just was like so meaningless. Why would I even drink a gulp of water to survive? Because it didn't feel
Yeah.
like it mattered.
When you're going through that, I've been through that. And so when you're going through that, this would be good for someone stuck there right
Mm-hmm.
now. So it's really difficult. You can't see it. You can't, like, you might have all the answers right beside you, but because you're
Mm-hmm.
focused on the self, that's probably what happens during depression. Me, my, I, poor me, I'm a victim, blah, blah. And so you're concentrated on that. You can't see anything else. But okay, when I was going through it, I remember hearing a guy saying, like, it's just clouds. It will disappear. You just have to wait. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And now I can look back and be like, yeah, it's totally clouds. And then quicker that you just sit with the gray clouds, and you have to ask the questions: who am I? What am I want? What am I here for? And it's all in service. And so the second that I stopped doing me, my, I, and put the focus on you, they, them, my whole life changed. And it's this is
Mm-hmm.
the podcast. What we focus on expands, right? So if
Yeah.
you're focusing on yourself and your misery, you're going to just see it everywhere, where the opposite is also true. So I guess my question there would be, someone who's going through it, who they just don't know what to do, they don't see any purpose or hope, what would you suggest? How can they start to turn the ship around?
I don't like to give just one little technique during this time because I had 1,000 of those little techniques because of my training, because of my exploration. I was looking for a spiritual teacher for 7 years and I picked up so many different things. And during this dark night of the soul, none of them worked because the most important thing that kept me in that place, I had to understand that first, that pitfall in which I spent so much time. And that was self sabotage. Self sabotage in such a way that even like you said, even if the answers were right beside me, even though I knew all this was happening for me, even though my father was somebody everyone else looked up to and he gave answers to everybody, even though I had read all these scriptures and I had so much wisdom and knowledge from them, none of them came to my use at that time because it's not about information. So if I give some information to somebody right now, it wouldn't really serve them
They have to be
because,
ready too.
yeah. And even if you're ready, like, even if a part of me was so yearning, burning for the truth, I saw that another part of me was sabotaging all those beautiful intentions to move forward. And unless you overcome self sabotage, no matter what you have access to in terms of resources, etc., it doesn't work, right? So that's the first biggest pitfall. It's like, as you said, it's like being alone in the dark in this big room, which has all these beautiful resources and everything. All, but what you're doing actually is you're stumbling, falling, even on all these tools, and you get hurt. Right? So
Right.
instead of being able to use them, because the very first thing that changes everything for people is awareness, first of all, right? It's like turning on the light switch and then you see where you are, you recognize that you have all these tools. Then
Wayne
suddenly
Dyer.
you can navigate this so much quicker.
Wayne Dyer has a good one. He says um, he's outside under the street lamp looking for his keys, and he's just going around. And all the neighbors come and they're like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm looking for my keys." And they're like, "Well, where'd you lose them?" And he's like, "Inside." And they're like, "What are you doing outside?" And it's like we're looking for all these answers outside of us when really all you have to do is just get quiet and ask those questions. And maybe the first question is, who am I?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, who am I is
And
that question which kind of dissolves all other things and goes to the core. It's the essential question.
yeah,
I have been fortunate to study in the lineage of Ramana Maharshi, who um, this was the question that he would come back to again and again, no matter who came to him with what. It came back to self inquiry. Oh, I'm having
that,
this trouble in this. Who is having this trouble?
oh, very good.
Because that
When
is the
are
essential question that liberates you. Because then
yeah,
you see that trouble is not really yours.
right.
Mm,
And the
mm,
thing is, like with impermanence and they're always changing, it's like
mm,
I think I heard someone say, if this is bothering you, ask the question, will this bother me 5 minutes from now, 5 weeks from now, 5 months from now, 5 years from now? If the answer is no, just let go. And
mm,
it's about detachment. You talked about ego earlier, and Wayne Dyer again, he says ego stands for edge God out. And so that's what happens. Once we edge God out, we're living from the ego. And you made a really good point. It is important if you need to put a roof over your head, you need to get a job, you need to do whatever. And so the ego comes into play in that part, but that's not the whole thing, right? And what's
mhm.
that Pierre Teilhard Chardin quote? I'm not a human being, or I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm. The dark night of the soul is caused by the ego, right? When God is calling you, inviting you to awaken to your divinity, the ego is afraid of that call. The ego is afraid of the journey that can ensue if you go on that call.
Is that self-sabotage comes in because of that?
Yeah, yeah, because the ego wants to maintain its story, maintain its status quo. It wants to remain comfortable. And because of that, it actually brings this suffering onto itself. It's just not seeing that this is happening for upliftment. This is happening for liberation. But it's so afraid of the unknown. In order to awaken to your true nature, which is a mystery, which cannot be understood from up here, we always use our headquarters. Our headquarters wants to control everything, and we lead our life from here. We are so stuck in the top floor. But you have to come down to the heart, the middle floor here, which is the balance that holds everything together. This is the middle way, right?
Oh,
And
wow. Yeah.
and in from the heart, when you look at something, it's so much more balanced, so much more comprehensive. And from this place, with the the love and inspiration, the compassion, those are the qualities of the heart. That is when you can actually awaken. And you cannot figure it out. You cannot use your ego to awaken, because it is the letting go of that ego, the surrendering of that ego, which lets you come back to your true nature. And from here, there is no separation. From here, there is no competition. From here, there is no up and down. From here, there is only beauty. There's only love. There's unconditionality. And that's when you can realize who you truly are. Mm,
That's the shift, right? It's only a
mm,
little 4 inches, 6 inches away from your head to your heart, but it's like, wow, so
mm,
powerful. And then
mm.
you start to see the whole world totally different. You said about question everything. So another series in this book, I'm not trying to actually sell it, is Alphabet Soup for the Soul. And it's just A is for the what altruism, B is for benevolence, but Q is for question. And there's an ancient Greek philosopher, Euripides, question everything, learn something, answer nothing.
Answer nothing. Yeah, it's more about the question than about the answer. Because when you question yourself, who am I? You're going to get a lot of answers. You're going to
How do you
get this thing
dissect
like,
what's the true answers that are coming through?
yeah, but no matter what answer you get, it's not true. Because as long as it's an answer which can be formulated in words, which means it's limited, which means it is something that has these boundaries that concepts have. As long as there is an answer, it's not true. So there
And
are
it's
so many
not
people
you
who
answering
practice.
it.
Yeah, it's you may have come up with 1,000 stories, and none of
Wow.
them really reach that essence, which can only be expressed through the deepest silence. Your realization is not any answer that can be formulated, no matter how beautiful a poem can be formed, no matter how lovingly you write it from here, even the most complicated answer you can come up with. You can write books about it. You can have entire schools of thought about it, but it's still thought. But to realize who you are, you have to go beyond all of that. And it's really helpful to have all that knowledge in the beginning, to study all that, to understand all that, to build up this understanding of who you are from here. But when you come back here, you have to let go of all that you have studied, all that you have grasped as knowledge. Until you really are able to let go of that, you cannot actually see beyond it.
Wow. That's so beautiful. I have a Mother Teresa quote. The trees, the flowers, the plants grow in silence. The stars, the sun, the moon move in silence. Silence gives us a new perspective.
You are an amazing library of these inspiring quotes. Like you have one for everything. That's awesome.
I do. I did like you, right? I started doing this and like, oh my God, it's not what I thought it was at all. And then I started reading voraciously is the word. I just
Mm,
started devouring knowledge and you
mm,
want more and more. And I think at the beginning, this might be a good tip for people just starting out either as a coach or on your spiritual path. It's important to get the knowledge, but that's like a circle that you're in, right? And if you stay in that circle, you're not going to grow. You can keep reading all the books, taking the courses, the certifications, but you actually have to apply it on yourself first, and then you can share it with other people, which is, I think that's the reason we're here, is to share with other people our gifts.
mm. Yeah, yeah. One more thing I would say, having read a lot, having spent years studying this, what was 1,000, even 1,000,000 times better was a few days with somebody who has done this, who showed me the way, a mentor who conveyed to me what cannot be conveyed in words. Uh, since you're reading Dalai Lama, there is a way that you can transmit your awareness to others. This is the long line of teacher student lineages that, you know, that goes back thousands of years, right? And I was able to have my first breakthrough, having studied this and progressed little by little on my own, just enough to be ready to receive that. When I met my first enlightened teacher, the first 10 days were incomparable to anything that I could refer to. I went into what is known as samadhi or satori. This is a state of realization of your oneness with all that is, where the mind, which is the separator, the ego, which is the separator, the creator of this illusion, completely stops. And it stopped
Great
for me for
feeling.
3.5 hours the first time, until I was woken up by somebody and called back into this body awareness. There was nothing. I was in an indescribable state of being where I didn't have a name, I didn't have a body, I didn't have a story. Mm. And it was the most liberating thing ever. And after that, many more experiences that showed me from different perspectives happened again and again and again. And no matter how much I had read, no matter all these guided meditations I heard on YouTube and all these other things, none of that could have conveyed that to me, but that experience.
Wow.
But
I'm really happy you got that. That's such a beautiful. I've heard of these. I've had something close, but not definitely not. It's almost like sometimes you take a sunset or a picture and it's like you look at the fireworks is a good one. Try to take a picture of fireworks and it's like that doesn't do it justice at all.
yeah, it's because just like our mind, our phone has so many filters, right? It can only capture a tiny, tiny slice of reality,
Wow.
infinitesimally small. And there's so much more that we lose in the process of capturing that.
Right. Can you talk about your journey through a monastery, becoming a monk? What were some of the biggest things? Like you just said, one of them right there was that books are good, but go with someone who's done it before. So that take us through the monastery, and then that will actually take us into you as the spiritual awakening mentor, Ra, the sun god.
I didn't become a monk until much later. When I first decided to become a monk and run away, as I was saying earlier, I got the guidance to wait for 5 years from a channeled guide who brings the wisdom from Shirdi Sai Baba. He's a saint from India as well. And I was given this instruction, wait for 5 years, because if you go run away to a monastery, what you'll find there is so much politics, and you'll be disgusted, and you will lose the path if you go to a monastery and run away. So I was told to stay and try to find a teacher and stay on this path. And Shirdi Sai Baba said, I will guide you on this journey. So at that time, I continued reading, trying to find teachers that I could go and visit and online and all that. And since my father had a lot of access because he was kind of popular and he had many spiritual teacher friends, so I was trying to meet teachers as much as possible. But what actually happened was I got more and more disappointed because I had really high standards for a teacher after reading that book, where I was like, I need an enlightened teacher. It was like enlightenment or bust, right? I looked for 7 years and I couldn't find somebody who could really show me the light. And that's when I started kind of surrendering and saying, I'm just going to follow my heart. I'm just going to follow what life shows me. And it's okay if I don't get a teacher. That surrender, when that happened, that is exactly when life gave me a teacher. And
That
I
is a
found
teacher.
life is really the teacher, right? More than anything else. But it's important to have a spokesperson who can kind of translate what life has in this teaching so that we can grasp it. It's accessible. So when I met my first enlightened teacher, this was in Tiruvannamalai, in the near the place of Ramana Maharshi. But after these 10 days of these amazing experiences, I couldn't function anymore as a human being. I was an actor before that. I was a photographer. Both of these were also parts of my quest for self discovery because when I acted, I studied psychology because I wanted to know myself. And in psychology, I got a chance to act. And when I did acting, I was like, I'm expressing a different aspect of myself. So maybe this will help me. And when I did photography, I was like, there is beauty in everything because there is God in everything. I have to find a way to show that beauty to others, capture that beauty, right? But when these series of experiences happened, it was as if everything I knew was taken away from me. And my entire life was turned upside down and shaken, and all the pieces fell apart. And I was left there to pick up the pieces, and I didn't know what to do. So I just left everything. I dropped my projects. I was acting as a lead actor in South Indian movies, and I just couldn't continue. So I lived in Tiruvannamalai, this place where I had that awakening. I just tried to reorient myself, relearn how to function essentially. And I stayed there for years. And after 3 or 4 years of this happening, I slowly integrated things. And I went through many more dark nights of the soul through this process, right? And I slowly integrated this. And this is when I found my Buddhist mysticism teacher. And later, he was the one who ordained me as a monk.
Wow.
And when I first wanted to be a monk, it was a very traditional way where I shave my head, I leave everything, I wear only the ochre robe, and it's complete negation of everything else. But when my Buddhist teacher gave me the vow of the monk, it was not traditional. It's not about anything outside. It's not, and he's because he's not a traditional teacher, he's a mystic. And the mystic, the way of the mystic is to go to the core, to go beyond the surface, the traditional, the ritual, and all this, and go to the pith teaching, the very essence of what that is. And the vow I took was to follow the path to enlightenment in my heart. And that initiation changed my life, changed something in me deeply. And I didn't really have to change anything else on the outside, but things changed by themselves.
Yeah, right. The perception of the world, like it's the same place. You're just,
Mm.
this is the story of the hero's journey, right? Do you know that story? Joseph
Yeah.
Campbell, and you go
Mm-hmm.
away, you find yourself, you come back, and the world didn't change. You're a different person, though. I wonder about that 10 days. Was that like a Vipassana? Like, was it silent 10 days or no?
No, this was an intensive retreat where I would meet my teacher twice. We would have um, satsangs. It's like an open question and answer format where there is no structure apart from that. And the teacher would come and he would connect with everybody. There would be sometimes silence, sometimes a little bit of a talk. And then somebody would come to the hot seat, as we called it, and ask a question. And the teacher would address them. And as they address them, everybody in the audience as well, in a way. And just in that very simple format, things unfolded. And yeah, there was just two of these sessions every day for 10 days. And The first experience that I had of samadhi was when I completely surrendered in my heart, knowing that this is the teacher life has brought to me after years of looking. So I honored this opportunity so much, and I opened myself up completely, because this is the marker of change, your openness, because there were other people too who were with him for, decades and more. But me being there for the very first time, I was able to go into those experiences because I was like so looking for a teacher for so long. It was so precious to me, that moment, that I wanted to make the very best out of it. And I opened myself up. Life wants us to awaken. God wants us to awaken, but it's we who hold ourselves back.
Yeah.
So when I stopped holding myself back, I was able to actually receive that teaching. And when my teacher said a few words, which came with this wave of energy with them, that was so powerful. It hit me, and my entire being shook, and my mind started freaking out. In the beginning, it was like, oh my God, what's happening? I don't know. And then it ground to a halt, and it fell silent. And as it fell silent, it just became dormant. And this entire world, as I knew, started like crumbling. It was, and I saw myself going into what cannot be described in words. It was, everything was light. I could see everything all around me with closed eyes. I was not in my body. My body was there, but there was no sense that it was me. So it was as if it didn't even exist. I could
Wow.
hear sounds as light. I could see sounds. I could, my perception in the beginning was light, and there was only light. And no matter what I say, it's really hard to kind of get a sense of what I'm saying. It's only to be experienced, but
Right.
that changed my life forever. And I would have probably stayed there for much longer. Everybody left. I was just sitting there like for like 3.5 hours, and everybody had left, had their dinner and everything. And there was this loving, kind woman who was like this motherly figure there, who was getting everybody food and everything. And she came back to check on me, and she was like, hey, you haven't had food. Everybody, like, are you okay? What happened? Why are you sitting like this? And she held my hand, called my name for so long. And I was lost in this thing. And this was like, this entire experience was like so minuscule in my consciousness. But as she called my name again and again, repeatedly, slowly, I started coming to that name attachment again. It's hard to say, but this name didn't mean anything to me for so long as she called it. But slowly I started getting a sense that this name is referring to me. Such a strange feeling. And then slowly it became more and more real that this name is mine, as I started coming back into my body, and I started feeling my body, and I could finally slowly move again. And it took me so long to even just sit up and get up. I was sitting up like this, but to move my body, to move my
Wow.
hands, it was such a huge like journey to even make a small movement. So
Yeah. I had a transcendental experience one time. I was on a treadmill and I started meditating while I was on the treadmill, and I just disappeared out of my body. I wasn't there. If you look at the video in the thing, you'll see a guy running on the treadmill, but I was not there. And then you come back after. And it's weird because the feeling would be called emptiness, but it's not emptiness. It's like it's the opposite of what somebody would think emptiness is. It's wholeness, but really, I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Yeah, emptiness is the fullest thing ever.
Yeah,
Because you, our headquarters is very black and white about these things, and it is very judgmental with labels and things. Emptiness, who wants that? But in that emptiness, you find everything.
yeah, because then it's all connected, really, right?
Mm.
Interconnectedness. And then you can see the Maya. That's its illusion, and like once you have a moment like that, there's no turning back. It's
Mm.
like I don't. At first, I didn't even want to tell anyone, man, because I was like, I'm like, my family and friends are gonna think I'm crazy. And
Yeah.
then I told them like much later, and they're like, "You're crazy." It was like, okay.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
have a question. How do you continue to grow, right? And you said something cool back there that I don't want to skip over, that you've had many spiritual awakenings. It keeps going up and down. And so I would wonder, is that the ego coming back in and pulling you back? And then so how do you continue to grow as well?
Yeah, it's easy to understand with physics, right? Because there is a momentum to the ego. You have built up this momentum about your story for decades. You have kind of built up all these habits that your nervous system responds to. You have figured out how to live life in a certain way, and that has become your routine. And all that is helpful actually in this world. It's important actually to function in this world, to have such structures. But when something comes in and disrupts all of that, which makes you go through a catharsis of sorts, you're actually peeling one layer of the onion off. And sometimes it's a huge layer or a few layers. But what happens after that is you have an awakening experience. Like after this awakening experience, this series of awakening experiences, because after that I had more experiences I still cannot describe. What happened was, as I tried to refigure out the world, these habits started coming back to me, but they didn't feel relevant.
Yeah.
I couldn't do the same things again, but I still had to function in the world. So I was like trying to see what's relevant to me, trying even how to say my name. Who am I now? Do I like talk about myself in the same way? Or like, is there a way to talk about myself? All such questions came, and I had to rethink this because it's important for your headquarters, which is controlling everything, to also be in the know, to get the memo of what's happening, right? And
Yeah.
the process of integration is long sometimes, especially when you're doing it alone. When I found my Buddhist mysticism teacher, he made it so much easier. He gave me the right structures, gave me clarity, gave me a community of people who supported me, who could understand me. When I was an actor, for example, and going through this awakening, nobody got me. Even though I was
Must
like
have been
the life of the
scary.
party and everybody was like, this is an actor and all this. And I felt it as a burden actually, that I had to
Sure.
fulfill those expectations. And
Right.
nobody, when I spoke about spirituality, really got what I was saying. So I felt isolated. I felt so judged, even in India, the land of spirituality, right? But
Right.
having the community, having the right guidance, having a mentor who really saw me where I am and could give me the next step, that helped with the integration so much. Because when I was doing it by myself, it was again and again dark night of the soul. Because I would integrate some part of it and my ego would freak out again. It would stop functioning, like I couldn't to get through the day.
It's like conflicted with yourself, right? The ego
Yeah.
wants to go back to what's familiar because it's
Yeah.
familiar and
Yeah.
that you know something else is there. I could even see the part about acting, how that must be like more difficult, right? Because
Hmm.
just the emotions, the styles, the yeah, like so I know what you're talking about a little from my experience was the same. At the very beginning, it was cathartic is a great word. It was so cathartic that these some scars were just coming up and I was trying to choke them back down.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
fortunately someone told me, no, no, that's the stuff coming up. You need to release it or it's just gonna come out a different way. So I started releasing it in like deep breaths like this. And it was scary at first because when I didn't know what was happening. But once I heard that that was happening, oh, okay, now I can just release it and move through
Hmm.
it. And then it collapsed the timeline, which sounds like what happened once you found your mystic.
Yes, collapsing the timeline is exactly what happened because I spent 3 years to trying to DIY, right? And I didn't have the right guidance. I didn't have clarity. I didn't have people who supported me. But having all that just changed everything. So what I do now is actually what could have helped me in that dark night of the soul when I was alone in the dark, when I was lost and confused and hopeless. If I had this guidance, I that I provide to others now, it would have made things so much easier, so much faster, so much more joyful, right? We don't
Yeah.
need to go through all this suffering.
Yeah.
It's completely optional.
Let's talk about your company then. So Awakening with Ra, talk about us. Is it one-on-one group coaching? What does it look like?
Yeah, Awaken with Ra is what I started because this is essentially what I'm here to do. This is what I have done for lifetimes. I'm an ancient soul. And life prepared me to do this in a very powerful way. Life gave me all these experiences. The suffering I went through, I realized was that blessing, that preparation that let me connect with others who are going through something really similar. In my mentorship, when somebody says, I'm going through this, it's so cliche now that I can say, I went through the same thing or something similar. And I know how it feels to you.
You could
So
tell them even this is what's going to happen next.
yeah, yeah, because it's the same pattern. The same pattern
Right.
I through again and again for years. I noticed people who are coming to me are going through the same thing. The stories are different, but the pattern is the same. So
Right.
what I do is just help them get to the next step, give them all the support, the community, the guidance, the clarity of where they are. Instead of being stuck, zoomed into that one little place they are stuck in, they now get a bird's eye view and they can see what's next. They can see that this is actually happening for them rather than
For
feeling
them,
like a victim of that
to them.
situation. And that changes everything, right? There
Yeah.
are mentees or students who had so much self-sabotage. Like everything you throw at them, they take it and make it as a weapon against God. But mentoring through that, finding a place to actually accept divinity, accept their divinity, that's the huge shift that needs to happen for people to integrate their awakening. That is actually what can help you take this journey that life has opened the door to. Spiritual awakening is just the beginning of the journey to enlightenment, right? So, unless you go through this catharsis and you are able to accept your divinity, you cannot reach the goal of that, which is enlightenment, which is
Yeah.
the realization of who you truly are. Spiritual awakening is just a glimpse of who you are.
Yeah.
And then to realize it takes work. Life gives you a sample. It's like Costco.
Nice.
You get a sample in the beginning and you're like, wow, this is so tasty. but you
Like,
gotta
hey, coming down
spend.
this aisle. Good.
Yeah, you gotta ask where it is, and you gotta go find it, and you gotta pay for it. You gotta earn it. You gotta do the work.
Do the work. That's what I was gonna say. I love that point because it's important. I think it's a forever thing. Like there's always work to do. And the second that you think there's not, that's your ego coming back in, and then you're boom, you're right back at the beginning. Maybe not the
Mm.
beginning, but shedding layers is a great concept. And
Yeah,
every go ahead.
but one big differentiator here is what I call the good news. The good news is that it's already here. Like Jesus said, the kingdom of God is at hand, right? This is not something that is external to you, it's already within you. Enlightenment is not finding something, figuring something out. That's an external concept. The fortunate thing is, this is something that cannot be separated from you, cannot be taken away from you. This is your birthright. And when you get that, you can remove the layers of conditioning which is hiding what is within you. And this is the process of enlightenment. So that's the way it's different from getting something from Costco.
Yeah. It's so true, right? There's the way I grew up in the church was like to think that you had divinity inside of you and that you had a piece of God inside of you was blasphemous. And it's very clear at the beginning of the book. It says the creator created you in his image and likeness. Not like there's a person, because it's not, he created himself after us. He create, right? So the creator created you. That means like you're a creator. That means you have the divinity inside you as well. And I don't know. I even still I talk about this with some old school people and they're like, you shouldn't be talking like that. I'm like,
Yeah, that's so true. When Jesus said, I and my Father are one, he was talking on behalf of all of us. We
yeah,
are
can I
made
go
in
there?
God's image.
Yeah. So in on body, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but this is such a good one. So you have the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, right? And so that's to me, it's almost like mind, body, spirit. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, we are. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
No, no, that's
but
perfect. I'm loving this conversation and the back and forth.
me too. And I'm looking at the time, and I think we might have to do a part two so I can prepare way more. But I think as we begin to wind down, if this episode resonates with you, please like, subscribe, share, reach out to Ra. You've heard the conversation, you know exactly what you're getting. And like you said, you could collapse the timeline. So we'll put all your stuff in the show notes and hopefully people can reach out. But I always ask everyone this. This is the Phase 4 podcast, and Phase 4 in the sixth phase meditation by Vishen Lakhiani is all about creating a future 3 years from today. So where is Ra 3 years from today?
Hmm. Whenever we plan something for us, ourselves, I always remember that God has a much bigger plan. Mhm. I always remember that no matter how big of an idea of a future that I can come up from my limited perspective, the possibility is so much bigger than I can ever imagine. Mm. So when it comes to a question like this, I see mm, that I can't even put into words where I will be in 3 years.
I kind of had a feeling you were going to say that. I honestly, I ask everyone that question, and something you just said is awesome. So there's a verse in the Bible, Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." And if I could give anyone one message, that's what it would be. And so
Mhm.
I would ask you, as we're finishing up, before I ask my final question, if you could leave someone with one message, what would that be?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. This I have contemplated for so long. If everybody was listening, what is that one thing I could say? And dear listener, I want you to receive this if you are open. into your heart. Hmm. Because these words come from the depth of my being, which is your being. Hmm. You are not here on this earth through this difficult life suffering as a victim. You're not in this 3D reality to make ends meet. You are a limitless being. You are God incarnate on earth. You are so much more than you can ever imagine. So don't believe your limitations. Don't hold yourself back into this temporary experience of being a human. Don't take that to be your real form. Accept your divinity, accept your enlightenment, accept this gift of life. Get yourself out of the way and discover your enlightenment. Namaste.
Thank you. Man, that hit my heart really hard. Thank you. I think my final question is, where can people reach you?
You can go to my website, awakenwithra.com, and I have for you a free spiritual awakening masterclass where I go in depth into what is really happening here with your spiritual awakening. What is holding you back? The three biggest pitfalls, and what are the things that can liberate you, help you go through this journey in a much easier way. And I'm also going to be releasing an app with a few different masterclasses soon, which will also be on the website and released. And if you feel you could benefit from my guidance or mentorship, if this resonates with you, you can join my waitlist to work with me as well. And I work with very few people one on one. So if something opens up, or when I have a cohort of people walking through this journey in a joyous way together, supporting each other, you would be able to join that as well.
Thank you so much for this. This was so awesome. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for having me and this beautiful conversation. Your questions, I really enjoyed this back and forth we had. This has been wonderful, and I can see how you have gone through your own journey, learning so much, and all the topics you've explored. Really beautiful. Thank you so much.